Hello and welcome to this story of my life. I'm already laughing about this because this is hysterical, but you'll love it. You'll love this. If this doesn't get a lot of thumbs up, you guys are heartless bastards. So this is one of the great stories of my life. As I've noted, I did landmark education in 1995, February 1995, and I did it for the purpose that Jennifer and I were on the verge of divorce. I wanted to divorce her because she was being a horrible, nasty person. And a friend of mine got me into the Landmark Forum, and that's the subject of another story, how I actually got into the Landmark Forum. This is a story of Indiana Bones at Landmark. The Indiana Bones story deserves its whole own story, because in every Landmark Forum, some story of some participant becomes legend, and Indiana Bones was the legend born out of our Landmark Forum. Indiana Bones was talked about a great deal. So I'll tell you the story of Indiana Bones and the Landmark Forum. But as background, Indiana Bones was a little dog I went and rescued from the dog pound one time. When we were living in a place called Seven Hills, we had a dog, and it was my wife's dog, and I didn't really ever want that dog. My Jennifer had called me and said I found a puppy in the and by the side of the road. They found this puppy, flea-bitten puppy, by the side of the road, had been dumped, and she said, "Can I bring it home?" And I said, "No, absolutely not, because we have two children, and we both work, and we don't have the time to take care of a pet properly. We don't have the fences, etc. So no, please don't bring. No, you cannot. You're asking my agreement, and my position is no. Don't bring this dog home. Take it to the pound." But, Jennifer, being Jennifer, brought the dog home against my expressed non-consent. Now, the agreement, of course, between Jennifer and I was for anything to happen that we're both going to be responsible for, we must agree, and that either of us could say no to something. And without agreement, the other was not free to go ahead. And so she'd violated that agreement, and so I took her to task about that. But anyhow, some years later, I decided that I should get a dog, my dog. And so we'd settled a little bit more, and we'd have everything sorted. And when you've got one dog, two dogs is not much of a difference. And so I decided I'm going to go and rescue a dog from the local dog pound, because in the dog pound, if the dogs don't find a home within a few weeks, then of course they're put down. And I went in, I wanted a little dog, just my dog, me being the master of the house. My dog would be allowed to be in the house. Jennifer's dog was far too hairy to be allowed into the house. And dropped a lot of hair. I mean, even on the back patio there was a lot of dog hair, so there was no chance of Phoebe coming in the house. So anyhow, I wanted a dog with not a lot of hair that could be in the house, and very small, because I didn't want to have a dog that would take a lot of maintenance. So anyhow, I went to the pound and I found this poor little flea-bitten mutt. He was a tiny little dog. He was 6 to 8 weeks old. We don't know exactly how old, of course. He'd been dumped, and he was just being eaten alive by fleas. He'd come in just a day or two before. They hadn't even washed him up yet. They'd put him in a cage and given him some food. Poor little thing was obviously traumatized and very fearful. He was shaking all the time and trying to hide in the corner of his cage. And that's kind of how I noticed him. He was curled up in the corner of his cage, looking around, kind of fearful. Could see how fearful he was. And so, and he was almost starved to death. He couldn't eat properly. This was, like I said, I think his second or third day there. He wasn't eating his food. He couldn't eat properly because he was so starved. And so, I picked him up and patted him and looked at him, etc. And he was shaking and trying to get out of my hands. So the poor little thing was so traumatized he couldn't even he was fearful even being handled. So I said, okay, well, this looks like the dog for me. Saving his life, obviously. He's obviously had a bad start of it. So we'll see how we go. And took him home and scrubbed him up and got the fleas off him, etc., etc. And the sores, there was big sores where the fleas had been biting him, so we put all the ointment on his sores, etc. Took him to the vet and had him checked out. He was healthy enough, except for the lack of food and the flea infestations and things. So after a few days, we had to think about a name for this little flea-bitten mutt. And his ribs were just sticking out so much from under his skin that I said, the name, I christened him, I said, the name I want for this dog is Indiana Bones. He's a bag of bones. So we'll call him Indiana Bones, and Indy for short. So that was my name for my dog, Indiana Bones. He's a lovely little dog. So fast forward to the Landmark Forum, and I was in it with my wife, and the reason I was there, they ask you a question 10, famous question 10, and question 10 says, what do you intend to achieve from your participation in the Landmark Forum? And what I wrote on my question 10 was, I want my wife to understand what a complete bitch she is and to start being nice to me again, and maybe we can remain married. That's what I wrote down, something like that. I want to fix my wife because she's a horrible person now. So we were in the forum together, and we're sitting next to each other. And this was the first morning. This was the first Friday morning. And of course, when you're in one of these large group awareness training sessions, people are very reluctant to talk, right? Very reluctant to get up and speak. Whereas me, put a microphone in my hand, I'm off, right? Off to the races. You put a microphone in my hand and I'm dangerous, right? So I'm off to the races. And, Gail's like, she asked some question, and has anybody got about love, or some question about love, or I can't remember exactly what she asked, but has anybody got anything they want to say about that? And I put up my hand, and she says, okay, Peter, give him the microphone. So they give me the microphone, and I say, yeah, my wife doesn't love me. And she looks at me, and she goes, that is your wife sitting next to you, isn't it? and I went, yeah, that's my wife. And, my problem is my wife doesn't love me. I said, I love her, but she doesn't love me. She treats me terribly. And Gail goes, and you're prepared to say that in front of her? Well, of course I'd say that in front of her. I'd say that to her. I say to her, no woman who loves her husband would treat me anything like you treat me. She treats me terribly. And she even fed my dinner to the dog. She doesn't love me. And Gail goes, is that true? You fed his dinner to the dog? And she goes, yeah. She's like, right, okay. So she says, so tell me, Peter, how do you, no, she says to Jennifer, so Jennifer, do you love Peter? Do you love your husband? Do you love your husband? And Jennifer says, yes, I do love my husband. And I say, well, no, you don't, because you treat me terribly. And if you love me, you wouldn't treat me terribly. You'd respect me, and you'd treat me decently. So I don't believe that. And so Gail looks at me and says, so you don't believe your wife loves you? I went, absolutely not. Said she says she does, but she doesn't. She's lying. I'm standing up in front of a group of 115 people saying this, right? And of course the 115 people are sitting there going, we don't usually hear people talk like this in public, particularly not about their wives. But of course the agreement is what's said in the room is not to be discussed. But even so, everybody knows if you say something in front of 115 people, the chances of it being discussed outside the room are pretty high. But I was there committed to a breakthrough in my relationship with Jennifer, and I was prepared to say in public that she doesn't love me because, the reason I know she doesn't love me is she treats me terribly, right? So that was the whole story. So then Gail changes tack, and she looks at me and she says, do you have a dog? I went, yeah, we have a dog. He said, what's your dog's name? I said, the dog's name is Phoebe. And she says, do you love your dog? I went, no. she looked at me and said, "Excuse me?" So I said, "Well, you asked me, do I love my dog?" And I said, "No, I don't love my dog." She said, "Really? You have a dog, you don't love your dog? Why don't you love your dog?" I said, "It's her dog. I never wanted that dog in the house. She found the dog by the side of the road, it had been abandoned. She called me and asked me, can I bring the dog home? And I said no. She brought the dog home anyway. So I don't love that dog, it's her dog. It's been a nuisance. I don't like that dog." And she's like, "Really? Okay, it's her dog. She brought it when you said no, so you don't love the dog." I went, "No, I don't love that dog. I wish she'd never brought it into the house." And she said, "Okay, I understand. So did you ever have a dog you did love?" I went, "Yeah, I did actually." And she goes, "Really? Okay, well, tell me about this dog you did love." And I said, "Oh, well, his name was Indiana Bones." And then I repeated the whole story of finding him in finding the flea-bitten nut at the local dog pound station, or the local lost pet station, etc., etc. I repeated that whole story. She goes, "Oh, well, hey, that's pretty nice. You went and did the save a dog thing." I said, "Yeah, I saved that dog's life." I said, "What happened to him?" He said, "Well, he wasn't a very smart dog, and at one time he got out when we were staying at Jennifer's parents' place. He actually dug his way out under the fence. He was small, and he managed to dig his way out under the gate and got himself run over on the road. So, he didn't last very long, and he wasn't very smart, and he got himself run over. And we didn't think that he could get out from under the gate. So that's what happened with him. He got out from under the gate and he got himself run over. So it was very sad." He goes, "Did you love this little dog?" I went, "Oh yeah, I really loved him. He was a really wonderful little dog. Very, very good natured, very friendly. He was a really lovely dog, and easy to pet, good company. Dogs. That's how dogs are, right?" And she's like, "Well, that's really great that you had a dog that you love. That's really good." And I said, "Tell me." And Gail says, "So tell me, did the dog love you?" I went, "Oh yeah, he loved me, and of course Indy loved me." And she said, "Really, you loved your dog and your dog loved you?" I went, "Yeah." She said, "Tell me, how did you know that Indy loved you?" I said, "Oh, just the way that he would follow me around, the way he'd sit on my lap. But also, times like when dogs are little, of course, they do what they do in your house. They pee and poo, and they have to be trained. They have to be taught, right? So, when he was little and he'd pee or poo in the house, he'd get his little head and rub his nose in it, because that's what you do. You rub their nose in the mess that they made. And then you take them outside and you hold them and you stand them until they do it again outside. And by doing this, they learn that they're to pee and poo outside, usually a particular area, if you set aside a place. So, I'd rub his nose in whatever mess he'd made, take him outside, hold him there until he did it again. But then, to reward him for doing what he was supposed to do, where he's supposed to do it, I'd take him and sit on my rocking chair, and I'd rock him and pat him on the head. And while sitting in my rocking chair, he used to just look up at me with these big brown eyes, and he'd pant and he'd stick his tongue out and smile and all the rest of it, because he knew that he was learning to do what he was supposed to learn to do. And in those moments when he'd sit on my chest and look at me like that, I knew that he loved me. And that's how I presented it. And Gail looked at Jennifer and said to Jennifer, "Well, Jennifer, now you know what you have to do." And of course, 115 people burst out laughing, because the idea of Jennifer replicating what the dog did, i.e. peeing and pooing in the house and then being made to rub her nose in it and take her outside, etc. That whole image, when Gail said, "Now you know what you have to do," that whole image flashed before everybody's eyes, and it was so funny. It was completely hysterical. So that was the story of Indiana Bones. The story of Indiana Bones being my little dog that I rescued, and then at the Landmark Forum being referenced as my dog loves me, but my wife doesn't. Now, of course, so I hope you like that. It's a really funny story that I've told many times. But of course, the upshot of all that is this, and that is that at the end of the day, Jennifer didn't actually love me, right? Jennifer never loved me. Jennifer was feigning to love me in order to get from me what she wanted, because there is no way that you can love somebody and then treat them as Jennifer treated me in divorce. That's just not humanly possible. So women say, with respect to divorce, women say, I used to love him, but I don't love him anymore, so therefore it's okay to steal from him, lie about him, slander him, destroy his life, etc., because I don't love him anymore. And I would argue that if you have ever loved somebody in your life, you would never, ever, ever do to them what women do to these men in divorce, right? What my wife did to me and the children in divorce demonstrates to me conclusively and irrefutably that she had no love in her heart for me at all ever, and certainly had no love for her children at all ever. And so that's kind of a pretty sad thing, that's the situation. But I just thought I'd tell you the Indiana bone story. It's a very funny story. No moral or lesson from that, just a very funny story. Thanks very much for listening.